Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast. The Coaching and Consulting Insight series introduces you to coaches and consultants that work with leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and individuals to create their best life and achieve and perform at their full potential. Our guest today is Eddie Rice. Eddie is a professional speechwriter with over 10 years of experience in helping business leaders, keynote speakers, TED Talk presenters, and everyday people enhance the messages that they tell through great storytelling and structure. Eddie is also the author of the soon-to-be-published book, Toast, Short Speeches, Big Impact, and that's expected to be published probably by the time this episode is live out on the podcast directories. Eddie, it's a pleasure to have you on the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight podcast.
Thank you for having me, Howard. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Fantastic. And I have to say, again, I enjoy that background. I'm sure it's not beautiful wood paneling, but vinyl or some type of screen, but it looks good on you there.
Oh, well, thank you.
Very good. So, Eddie, we met through a podcasting clearinghouse that you're looking for guests, you're looking for podcasters. And what really drew you to me is you used to be a Toastmasters guy. I used to be in Toastmasters, and I thought, this is someone that I can talk to about speech giving and presenting, and maybe he can even help me with my USM. So I have a little agenda here, but I really, really want to, again, thank you. And let's start off for our listeners. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I actually started out as an 8th grade science teacher and did that for 5 years. And that really helped me become a better presenter in the classroom because you had to keep the attention of 13-year-olds for a good solid hour. Not only that, I was teaching them science, and I had to break down really complex topics into simple to understand ideas to get them across in just, under an hour, which our classes were. And I didn't stay with teaching, but instead went out on my own, thought I was going to be a public speaking coach. But truth be told, I actually failed in that business. At the time, I didn't know how to get clients. I didn't know how to put together a website. I didn't know how to do content marketing. I didn't know any of that. So I failed. But what I did discover is that people wanted speeches written. And I relied on my background from college, which was in philosophy and rhetoric, to help people write speeches. This was before Upwork. There were sites like Elance and Odesk and Guru.com. I think some of those are still around. But there were people that needed speeches on these sites. And I said, you know what? I might not be able to help with the coaching part, but I can write a speech, turn it around for them, and let them go deliver it. And that's what provided the first base of clients for me. And then I finally taught myself, okay, how do I build a website? How do I use WordPress? How do I market myself and get referrals? And it took off from there.
That is a very interesting journey, and there's a lot to unpack there. And the coach in me is going to unpack that right now with you, because I think it's going to be helpful to some of our listeners. Let's start off with the kids. I mean, these kids are like 13 years old, 8th grade or 7th, 8th grade, 13 years old.
Yep, around there.
Okay. How, and this is for all the parents out there of 13-year-olds, how do you keep a 13-year-old's attention? What were the tips and tricks that you had?
First, it started with me being passionate about the topic that I wanted to speak about. So I went in there and just with lots of passion every day taught the material. And then second, we had to change it up. So it wasn't just straight presentation. It was bringing in video clips. This is when YouTube was just getting off the ground, and TEDx and TED were also getting off the ground. And I was showing clips from those presentations as well. And then the hands-on part of it was really key. We would do just science experiments. I mean, we dissected a shark. We would do tons of different stuff inside the classroom that was hands-on to really bring the material to life. So it was about variety, it was about passion, and really those hands-on activities where they got to participate in the learning. Those just amplified what we did in the classroom and kept the attention on most days.
Okay. Do you find on some days you miss being Mr. Rice, or is it, it was a great experience. I loved it. There's the peaks and the valleys, but I've moved on. You're sometimes kind of think back about that.
Sure, there are certain days that I do miss it. I miss the teaching aspect. What I don't miss are the 12 to 14-hour days that we were working. Our kids went to school, it was a charter school, and they went to school from 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, which meant you as a teacher were typically there 6:30 to 6:30, and school didn't end at 6:30 p.m. for you. Our kids were actually allowed to text us until 9 p.m. to get help with their homework. Not a lot took us up on that offer, but we had to have our phones on and email accessibility as well for all of the other teachers who were emailing you after hours. So I don't miss those parts, but I do miss inspiring young students to take science seriously, to become future surgeons, future doctors, future scientists in their life. And I am, LinkedIn friends with a few of them, and they have gone on to those really cool science careers. And that just kind of shows me that I did make an impact in the lives of a few of them. And I just cherish those moments tremendously.
That is fantastic to hear. And I love asking that question. What happens when you run into somebody who years ago you touched their lives? And to be able to hear that back from you today, I think is a testament to the passion you had for being a teacher. And we can then look at these students and see what they've accomplished, and in some shape or fashion you had a role in it in some way. And I love that. Thank you. So in the further unpacking, when you went to university, you were a literature and there was rhetoric. So tell us more. What is, I think I get literature, but what is rhetoric?
With rhetoric, we studied the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans. So we would study Aristotle and Cicero and learn their techniques for public speaking and for structuring presentations. And what we did in my favorite class, which was a class that looked at, well, what did Aristotle and Cicero say? And then how does that apply to modern day public speaking? And the truth is, in over 3,500 years, the advice really has not changed. So whether it's about using repetition in what you are trying to say, or having a well-structured speech, or playing to your audience's emotions and telling a great story, all of that comes from Cicero and Aristotle and their contemporaries. And that advice still holds up today for any presentation that I have to put together for myself or for somebody else.
When you look back at this education and continuing to put into practice what you've learned, is there one individual in particular or a couple that when I think about them, I just think about while I am walking in the footsteps of God, so to speak?
I think it's all of the people that I just mentioned, Aristotle and Cicero, both. I think just how they laid it out. And then we got to test some of their principles kind of in class. We would be given these scenarios where we would have to argue the affirmative or the defense of an argument. And you would have to then pretty much trust yourself as a speaker that the ideas would come to you when you were speaking because of all the preparation that you did. And that I think is something that is missing a lot of times with public speaking advice. Well, maybe not too much, but people focus on the words and the presentation, but don't always focus on the preparation. And that to me is what is missing quite a lot from when people come to me for a speech. They're right up on the deadline for what they need to say. And it's going to be a good speech, but it could have been even better if that person had given themselves a few weeks to prepare what they wanted to say. And that to me is you have to strike that balance between your prepared text and what you actually do as a speaker to prepare yourself to speak.
I want to get more into the work that you're doing to help individuals like me or anybody else on the street become a better writer or a speaker, but also thinking back to this initial entrepreneurial side as a public speaker, where do you think for the sake of a better metaphor, I was just in Boulder City, Nevada, and there's like a train museum. So when did the wheels come off the tracks in terms of that initial foray into being an entrepreneur?
Oh, I think it was when I first tried to launch my own business of being the public speaking coach. And I just was flailing around. I didn't know, I guess I tried to put a website together myself and it was horrible. Maybe if people use the Wayback Machine, they can go find it, but I won't give out the URL. But it was that plus not knowing how to get referrals because I was in the classroom for 5 years, not building up professional connections, but student connections. And then just not knowing how content and Google worked either. So it was just a combination of all of those factors that led to that failure with the wheels coming off. And I actually had to move back home with my parents for a little bit while I figured things out. But I used that time to still reflect and try again. And that's when I took it really seriously and relied on other people to help me build my website. Took content marketing seriously by writing blog posts and guest blogs. And then Google helped me out from there in terms of the backlinks. And that helped tremendously with getting more clients in. And then I was no longer scared to ask people for referrals. And sometimes I didn't have to ask. I just got a referral from someone because I did just an outstanding job with their speech. And it just built up from there.
Do you remember the first speech that you wrote, and maybe it was just you and your heart and like, my God, this is great? Or that client of yours came back and said to you, you're not going to believe this, Eddie, but this speech just rocked. Do you remember that?
I do. Those were the few early days when I was on Elance and I wrote a few speeches for people. And I was definitely undercharging at that point, 100%. But you live and you learn.
Yeah.
But I do remember when those came back, just the feeling of we had nailed it. And I had started to then uncover what made the process so good. And it was because of the quality of conversations I was able to have with these clients. It wasn't just an email back and forth and someone said, I need you to write a speech on honor or motivation. Instead, it was a partnership with each person. And we were able to go in depth into what they wanted in the speech. And I knew then it was about pulling the ideas out of people, not putting my own words on the page, but putting their words on the page and making them sound just a little bit smarter. And that helped tremendously in creating a really great speech that they wanted to give because it was their own words reflected back to them.
The process of giving your client the speech that you've worked with them up front to gather that information. I do the same thing with LinkedIn. We don't just go right into changing a LinkedIn profile. We have a conversation. When you began working with the clients, is there a duration? Do you just have a gut feeling? I think I've got the information that I need. Is it an iterative process as opposed to waterfall where you just, here you go, or you kind of meet periodically to review and refine?
It's very iterative. So the way it starts is with a brainstorming questionnaire that I do send over email, but then I make sure that we get on the phone or we get on Zoom to talk through it. And after that, I usually have enough information to create a first draft. And then I share that draft with the client and we go back and forth on that draft until it's where it needs to be. Now, however, if the speech is longer, let's say it's a wedding toast versus a keynote speech or a TEDx speech, for the speeches that are going for 18 minutes and longer, we have a lot more of those pre-brainstorming calls where we go really in depth into what they want to say, their story, their research. And when I work with especially TEDx speakers, it could be 4 brainstorming calls before a first draft is even written or even an outline. But those calls are so important because you're listening for the person's voice, how they couch their ideas, and it also helps them get more comfortable with you because it's a very heavy lift and time commitment for the longer speeches for us to work on.
How do you begin to find the speaker's voice? And I'm asking this, one part of me says there's some intuition that goes into this. Maybe it's just my experience. I've been doing this long enough. Or are there other intangibles to go into that you're looking for to help find that speaker's voice so you can begin to produce those drafts for him or her?
I tell my clients that they're the expert, and that really helps them kind of let their guard down, and they teach me about their subject matter because I'm writing in various subjects that I don't have much background in at times. So what happens is I'll ask for their blog posts, their website, if they've written a book, if they've spoken anywhere. And that really helps me to understand their perspective, where they're coming from. And then from there, it's about the art of the interview in pulling out stories that they want to tell and not the cliche ones like the scorpion and the frog or the starfish story, but true stories that they can tell that are unique to them. And once I have those stories in place, then it's a lot easier to really nail down their voice and what it is that they want to say.
Is the 18-minute speech, the TED Talk, I know there's a length of a TED Talk. Is that 18 minutes or
About 18 minutes, I believe. Yep.
18 minutes versus the toast at the event, wedding, bar mitzvah, anniversary, etc.? Do you put in, it's maybe not the iterative aspect of it, but the same kind of energy to get out from the client what you need to help produce that draft for them?
Yes, very much. I think it's just duration of time that it takes to put something together. I'm pretty good with the wedding toasts and bar mitzvah toasts and the retirement toasts. Those can get done in about a day after talking with someone. That's just been something that's really come really easily to me. But at the same time, it's still the same process of a brainstorming questionnaire, of a conversation, and just getting the stories out from the person. But usually I can do that in one conversation and have the speech written fairly quickly. It's just when there's a lot of content on the line, especially in a subject that I may not understand, that it takes a little bit longer to put that type of speech together.
When you look back at some of these speeches, and let's use the extreme, those are my words. I know they're not your words. The toast, let's say the wedding toast, those can get caught a body. Those can be very boring, etc. Versus say the TED Talk. Because I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, their view of success is to get in on a TED stage or a TEDx stage. When you look back first at the wedding or anniversary, do you ever have clients come back to you and say, Eddie, again, you're not going to believe this. This rocked. And they keep talking about it.
They do. They even send me videos of their presentation of their toast. I got one from a lady who put together a birthday toast for her, I think, 70-year-old mother. And she was just like, and we had a really great time putting the speech together. But when she gave it with such energy and passion and just humor. She had her timing down incredibly well because she had practiced it so much. Because I told her, now that we have the words, it's on you to practice this speech and to do it really well. And she took that advice to heart. And when I got the video back, you had the whole crowd laughing. People were in tears. And it just warmed me inside to know that we put together a solid product that just overwhelmingly got great reviews from everyone. And she's come back to me for other small writing assignments. And it's just been wonderful working with that client.
Repeat business, referrals, nothing beats it. Nothing beats it. When you were working with her and you talked about the practice, so after you've developed an awareness of the client's voice, you help the iterative process of creating the speech, and then they have to go and practice. Do you have a rule of thumb that you would offer to them about how much practice they need?
Yeah, it's really more about gut feeling and internalizing your speech. So what I offer to people is what's called scaffolded memorization as a technique. So what you do is you start out with the entire speech written down word for word, and you practice it enough times to where you're comfortable with the text on the paper. Then you recreate the speech, but you recreate an outline of it where you just include the main ideas. Then you give the speech just from that outline. And you forgive yourself for not having every and, the, and but in the right place. But as long as the main ideas are getting across, you're good to go. And then you keep repeating until your outline is shorter and shorter to where it can just appear on note cards. And that's when you know that you've got the speech down, that you can just give it from a few bullet points.
Do you recommend that the client practice in front of a mirror, the family member, the best friend, out in the middle of a park and perhaps be looked at funny by passersby? How do you recommend your clients to practice their speech?
Usually the first step I tell them is to use the voice recorder app on their phone and to play back their speech after they've rehearsed it, because then you hear the parts that are too long, you hear the awkward phrases, you hear the joke that you thought was funny in your head, and then you realize, oh, that might not be as funny as I thought it was. So I really encourage people to play back their speech to them. And then if you do want to practice it in front of family members, I tell people to find the critical friend, the person that's not going to lavish praise and tell you that you're perfect, but then the other person who is going to be completely negative with your speech. You need to find that person who can be real with you and say, this is what I liked, this is what I didn't like, this is where you can improve. If you have that type of person in your life, use them as your sounding board for the speech.
Okay. Let's have a quick look at the TEDx or the keynote. What has been the reaction to some of your clients for those types of?
Oh, they have been really well received. I work with Elena at Red Dot Stage for the TED Talks. And her process is the one that I mentioned earlier, where we're going through such an extensive brainstorming process with these clients that we can't help but write a great speech as a result of it. And that's because the person has really told us their life story. They've told us where they're coming from, and we ask probing questions such as, what idea are you looking to overturn? Or what idea are you looking to, go against the grain with? Because those are usually the best TED Talks, is when you can get the audience to think about something in a new, a different, a unique way that they hadn't thought about before. And with those speeches, it's still iterative, where we have the brainstorming session, the outline, the first draft, the second draft, the third draft. And by that point, we've got a really solid speech. And the actual bonus for a lot of these clients is that once they've gone through that process, their application to get on the TEDx stage or even the TED stage is even stronger, because they can then bottle it up, have their great summary, and answer the questions on that application form so much better because they have a really solid speech behind them.
Excellent. It sounds to me that if I was going to it would have to be a want to get on a TEDx stage, I definitely would have to come in, have a conversation with you. Let's talk a little bit about Toastmasters, if we could, because you mentioned that in some of your show notes. And I have to tell you, during our conversation today, I am trying to be very diligent about my uhs and my ums and my you knows. I am notorious for I think I'm doing okay today. I don't know about, you're doing great, by the way.
Oh, thank you. You're pretty good too.
All right. How has the model of a Toastmasters perhaps informed you or informed inspiring speakers, presenters? I mean, because it's a very specific model as you go through the program and you become a master Toastmaster, for that sake of a better word. What about that model continues to be relevant, or are there new techniques that are out there with some remarkable success, so to speak?
I think the model is pretty long lasting. And for the listeners out there that may not know about Toastmasters, it's a weekly membership club where you have the opportunity to present a prepared speech or an impromptu one with what they call table topics, where someone asks you a random question and you have to speak for 1 to 2 minutes on the topic. And what Toastmasters does is it gives you a positive, uplifting, and affirming atmosphere in which to receive feedback and to practice. And that is just absolutely crucial. And I believe my membership dues for 6 months went up to maybe $45. It used to be, I think, $36. But for public speaking training, that is an incredible bargain. There are public speaking coaches out there that will charge you hundreds of dollars an hour for what you can get in Toastmasters over a series of months for an absolutely rock bottom price. And I think what I love most about the club is I can get up there, give a short speech, get feedback, work on that feedback, give another speech, try again, and you just start to improve just speech after speech after speech. You may not be seeing it, but I've seen speakers go from just like shaking and full of nerves at their first speech to being polished speakers by their 10th. And it's amazing to see that confidence change in somebody just by going through the program. And it's just an experience that can't be beat anywhere else.
When I coach my clients on the career development realm, one of the first places I will always recommend they go to is find a local Toastmasters, especially if they want to get better at speaking, presenting, their presence, as well as networking. It's a great networking opportunity. And I love, again, when I came across your profile on Podmatch, it's like, yeah, this is a guy I definitely want to have a conversation with. I loved table topics. Absolutely loved it. To get up and even to talk about my icebreaker, which I do like it's the back of my hand these days because I use that all the time. But longer speeches, the humor speech, the serious sales presentation, etc. Is there a particular experience that you have from Toastmasters, maybe an aha moment that went like, wow, this is great, or okay, what am I doing here?
Sure, I'll go with that second one. And so one thing that also makes Toastmasters unique is they have competitions. And one of them is the humorous speech competition. And I thought I was going to enter that and do well in it. Sure enough, I go out there, it's the first night, you compete at your club level. So just the people that you go to Toastmasters with every week. And my first speech, it went incredibly well. I had everyone laughing. Every line landed, every story was just well told. Everyone was just enjoying it. I could just tell by the looks on their face and the actual laughter that I got. I thought I got a shot at this. Go up to the next level. And it's with a group of strangers in a much larger room. Everyone's got on really nice clothes. There's that mix of kind of cologne and perfume in the air. It's kind of like church. And I start with my first story, and there was just dead silence. So I go into my second story, and I get that kind of tepid laughter of like, oh, we think that's supposed to be funny. And just my mind was just racing. And it was the fact that I was bombing at that point. My humorous speech was not humorous at all. And I sat down afterwards, just deflated and defeated. But luckily, my mentor told me, Eddie, look, it's painful, but it's worth it. And I made sure to stick with Toastmasters, to continue speaking, and to continue improving my craft. I may give the competition another go or go into their more serious competition, which is the, what's it called? The International Speech Contest, where you give kind of a more serious keynote speech in about 5 to 7 minutes. But I'm glad I stuck with it. And I knew that it was going to be painful, but worth it. And that's just really stuck with me the whole time.
Fantastic. I love that story. Your chapter, now you are in the Cleveland area. Is your chapter virtual? Are they local? You wanted to do a shout out for them?
Yeah, it's Eastside Toastmasters in Shaker Heights, Ohio. And we just went back to in-person meetings. And
Fantastic.
I just rejoined Toastmasters after a 10-year hiatus because I said to myself, look, if I'm going to help other people become better speakers, if I'm going to go on podcasts to talk about public speaking, maybe I should actually do some public speaking myself to get back into the swing of things.
Probably not a bad idea. Let's talk a little bit about your book, The Toast. I love that. Short speeches, big impact. Tell us more about that. When did this idea, I want to write a book, when did that come about?
I think it's something I always had in me when I started writing speeches for others, but I didn't know how to put my words onto the page for a book. I could write a speech, but a book, writing it chapter by chapter, is a whole different beast. But it was about 3 years ago when I decided to make it a serious endeavor. And to be honest, the first few drafts of the book were just terrible. I mean, I was flailing around, didn't know what to do. So I took a step back and created a super detailed outline of everything that I wanted to say in the book. And I went out and got feedback from other editors and other beta readers on just the outline. They thought it was a little bit weird that I just wanted feedback on an outline, but they went along with me and humored me in the process. And I got some just amazing feedback from that outline, sat down, rewrote the book from scratch according to that outline. And my draft was just much stronger in the end. I remember sending it off to my friend who's an editor, and she said, Eddie, this is a complete book at this point. You have a complete product here. This is not like your earlier drafts, which were just incomplete messes. But instead, she saw the benefit of what I did of writing to an outline, and that made all the difference in the world.
Fantastic. And really kudos to your friend. That's fantastic. Talk a little bit more in detail about the premise around the book. And I get toast, but for our listeners, structurally, what would they expect when they kind of dive into this book?
Sure. It comes in two parts. The first part is my process that I use with my speech writing clients. And I just wrote down what I do step by step. And I take the reader through that entire process. So we go through the brainstorming questions, we go through how to outline the speech, then how to actually sit down and write the draft, and then how to revise it, even if you don't have someone like me revising your speech. I teach a technique called revising out loud, where you give your speech out loud and you go through it and you can hear all of the parts that work or don't work. Then the second part of the book is actual toasts that people have given that you can use as models for your own speech. So I break down why the toasts work, what is great about them, particular outlines that people can then adopt for their own speech. And then the book just ends with a conclusion of how to put it all into practice, such as, how do I then take all of these steps and budget out my time to make sure that I have enough time to go through everything in advance of the big day.
Fantastic. Well, whoever picks up this book later on this month, they're going to have, it sounds like quite a few nuggets of gold. So congratulations again.
Thank you.
As you look back on your career, is there anything you would like to share with your younger self? Because it sounds like you went from teaching, a little foray into public speaking, and now you're in your sweet spot and continuing to grow. Now you're going to be, quote unquote, soon to be a best-selling author, no doubt about that. But any advice you'd give your younger self?
Oh, wow. That is tough. Let's see here.
That was the gotcha question I kind of warned you about.
What would I tell my younger self? I think to trust in the future, that I was on this path of reinvention for my life, going from 8th grade science teacher to speechwriter. And then I held multiple jobs in between: a content marketing manager, a marketing manager for a co-working space. I was doing resume writing during the pandemic because there weren't a lot of speeches to be given. And I think it was just trusting that the future was going to work out in the way that I wanted it to work out, to where I now have, 1, a full-time job, 2, I can speech write on the side, and 3, I now have a book that I can then talk to people about and help them in their journey. Had I known that 10 years ago, I think I would have had a lot less anxiety and nervousness about the future, knowing that it was worth it to take these different paths, because each one really informed me and gave me a transferable skill that I took into the next phase of my life, whether it was how to do marketing or just to fall back on my writing skills, or to simply learn that you got to try really hard multiple times at many different things till you find out what actually works. You have to treat your life like it's a product at a company where you're going through multiple iterations, multiple tests to find out the version that works the best for you.
I love it. You did great. You did great there. Before we head out, one final question for you. Any other piece of advice that you would give to our listeners? And we call this segment the Insight to Go. But what is the insight do you want to leave with our listeners? Could be a quote, a book, maybe again, just another variation of what you've just shared. What works?
When it comes to giving a toast, honor the person, honor the event. If you can achieve those two goals with your toast, you're going to have a great, great toast to give. And what I mean there is too many people confuse a toast with a roast. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. Instead, you want to get up there and truly honor the person that you're giving the toast to, and then honoring the event itself by respecting its decorum and the words that you use and the stories that you tell. I tell people kind of the in law test. If you're at a wedding and you're sitting down with that person's in laws at dinner, would you tell those same stories? If that answer is yes, go ahead and tell them. But if that answer is no, then leave those for one-on-one conversations and the bachelor or bachelorette night. That's where those stay. But ultimately, as long as you're honoring the person and honoring the event, you're going to have a great toast.
Fantastic. And to those examples that we're not honoring, I think there's a huge population or inventory of YouTube videos out there for that. So
Very much.
thank you for that insight to go. And Eddie, before we head out, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
The first would be my website, ricespeechwriting.com. So that's RICE speechwriting.com, just like the food. And you can find the first chapter of my book there as a free download to get. And then, of course, on Amazon, the book is up for pre-order as a Kindle version right now, but the print version will be released on April 18th, in addition to an audio version that will come later in the next few months once we get that recorded.
Fantastic. And I know you're also on LinkedIn, so we'll provide backlink to your profile as well, because in this business, your ideal clients, or many of them, are on LinkedIn. So
Very much. Just had someone message me the other day that I hadn't talked to in probably 2 years. And we reconnected, and he needs a series of speeches written, and we're talking at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
fantastic. Eddie, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. It is just as soon to be after 6 in Cleveland. I know you're probably happy baseball season is going to be starting soon, and nothing better than rivalry between the Cleveland Indians and the Detroit Tigers, where I grew up.
Oh, right. But they're the Guardians now.
Oh, it's right. They had to change their names. Oy.
Yeah.
Well,
We're all still getting used to it. Same thing with calling Progressive Field Jacobs Field. We still call it the Jake. And I'm sure many people will still call them the Indians, but they are the Guardians now. I was hoping they'd go with the Cleveland Spiders, doing that throwback to the name they used to have. But I think that probably creeped out too many people during their focus groups.
You got to love some of those focus groups and what they come up with, let me tell you. Well, listen, and again, thank you for taking time out of your day. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we wish you much success in your endeavors. I'm looking forward to diving into the book myself, because even here as a podcaster, or when I do get to present, it's always good to be prepared and also be able to do a much better job. And so I truly appreciate the words and the insights you shared with us today. So thank you so much.
Howard, it was wonderful talking with you. You're a great interviewer and have an awesome show. Thank you so much for having me on.
Fantastic. Well, listen, stay on the line. We're going to do a real short close, and you and I can have a final chat. Okay.
Sure.
All right, folks. What an episode today. We've just been chatting with Eddie Rice, professional speechwriter. Really, it was kind of a very interesting, and I love hearing people's journeys, going from being a teacher to an aspiring public speaker, and then to ultimately finding his footing as a speechwriter and helping individuals, whether it's keynotes, toasts at family events, TED Talks, presentations. This type of information can be used by anyone, wherever you are, whatever you're doing in your life. And so I would definitely encourage you to dive into first this podcast, a lot of great insights here, but also check out many of the resources that Eddie shared with us, Toastmasters being one, the book, Toast, Short Speeches, Big Impact, which is going to be available very shortly. Well, it's available now on pre-order on Kindle and later in the month on paperback. So take advantage of it, because if you can stand up wherever and give a speech or present, you are actually adding to your professional possibility. And because in this day and age, if we are not good at communicating, life's going to pass us by. And so this information is so very important. And this skill, this expertise is so very important for anyone. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Do let us know. You can find us on successinsightpodcast.com. You can find us on our Facebook channel, Success Insight Podcast, LinkedIn, the same, Success Insight Podcast. We are on all the podcasting platforms, so whichever your preference is, that's where you go. Just do a search for Success Insight Podcast. On Spotify, we also have the Coaching and Consulting Insight series. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you on a future episode of the Coaching and Consulting Insight series on the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.